By 1938, German aggression that would lead to World War II was in full swing. Igor Sikorsky would fly the world's first practical helicopter. And you're probably thinking, that looks totally safe. But what I'm thinking is he really wearing a top hat? And Cary Grant, alongside Katharine Hepburn, would star in a movie called Bringing Up Baby. And yes, that is a real leopard named Nisa in the back seat. By 1938, the Walkers had moved back to Quanah, and Judd soon took ownership of his father's cafe. By the way, in case you're interested in where Quanah got its name from, it came from Quanah Parker, a renowned Comanche chief who was the last principal chief of the Comanche Nation. In this picture, which was in 1896, this is 250 Comanche soldiers on a 4th of July parade going through Quanah, Texas.
I remember Maxine got a job at Rexall drugstore, and Geneva got a job at the theater, selling tickets, at the theater. And George went to work for a grocery store, and Dad had went back in the cafe, and I don't know when he came back. He ended up buying Grandpa's interest in the cafe.
Business was still slow, and times were still hard. But the Walker family was an explosion of young and old. Maxine and Geneva are almost 20 years old, and Lloyd is just one. Carl, Garland, Rayford, and Lloyd are now growing into their own.
He's got in trouble quite a bit. Carl would do most anything to please people. Carl wanted to be liked and he wanted to please people. And Daddy used to say that Carl would steal a dime off of a dead man's eye if it would make that person like Carl. But he was fun and he was good to everybody.
Carl was always in trouble for something. And one time Carl drank kerosene, and it was very serious. Made him really ill, and Mother was very upset.
Carl, that's something else. That's I guess Carl is best known for not being able to find his way around the block. Anywhere Carl went, you could depend on him getting lost, no matter where. Quite a few years later, Carl and Garland both worked for Geotech down on the Gulf Coast, the same place where I was working. And we started home one night. All three of us were single. And it was nighttime when we left, and it was about 500 miles from there to Quanah, and we were going home. Well, I got in the back seat and went to sleep, and all of a sudden I felt the car stop, and Carl was driving, and so it woke me up when the car stopped, and I said, what's the matter? He said, I'm not sure where we are, if we're on the right road. And I said, well, what was the last town we went through? He didn't remember. I said, well, what highway are we on? He didn't remember. There's nothing except a few stars up there to tell us where we were. And I said, well, keep going till you get to the next town, then we'll figure out where we are. But he's known, everybody knows Carl's going to get lost.
Carl was the athlete in the family. He taught me how to throw a curveball, how to throw a fastball. We used to go out behind the restaurant in the afternoons and play catch. And he'd stand at one end of the lot, and I'd stand at the other, and would throw the ball to each other. And I can remember just how much like raw hamburger my hand would be after we'd get through one of our catching sessions. He worked, of course, Carl went into the Navy as well, but when he came back out of the service, he stayed in Quanah and worked in the cafe for a number of years. So I got to know him better than I did many of the other family members early on in life.
After I'd been there a while, he said, "We need to hire somebody else." He said, "Do you know anybody?" And of course, he knew Carl. He knew the whole family, you know. And at that time, Carl and I was still in school, you know. And I said, "Well, I think Carl would like to go to work." He said, "Well, why don't you bring him by and I'll talk to him." And I said, if he wants to, if he'd be interested in working. I said, okay. So I went after school, was at the cafe, and I asked old Carl, I said, "Mr. Clemens needs somebody else." I said, would you like to go to work over there?" "Oh, yeah, you know, I mean, anything." I said, "Well, he wants you to come by," and so we starting over, and his grocery store was right across the street from the post office. And we get about 2 blocks from there, and Carl starts to walk across the street, and I said, "Where are you going?" "Oh," he said, "you talk to him. I don't want." I said, "What do you mean, me talk to him?" I said, he wants to talk to you." No. That sucker walked the rest of the way, and was and Mr. Clemens was expecting us. And he was standing there in front of the post office, and so I walked in, you know, and he said, "Hey, Three," he said, they called Carl Red. He said, "Did you bring old Red with you?" And I said, "Well, brother, I mean, he's standing over there in front of the post office. He won't come in. He's too bashful to come in." He said, "What's the matter with him?" I said, "No, I don't know, he's just too bad." And he said, "Well, he'll make a good hand, won't he?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, he's a good worker." So he went there at the door grocery. He was standing on one side of the street, and Carl standing on the other, and he said, "You want to go to work, Red?" He said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Okay." He said, "Well, come by after school and you can start." That's how he got started with.
All right, let's take a look at Garland here. I'm not saying that James Dean owes us any money for stealing Garland's look. I'm just saying I think Garland had first dibs on that look.
Garland was always busy being mean.
Garland has always been an adventurer. He was the one that rode the cow and got his leg broke. Carl got his arm broke. But Garland decided, we had a cow, and Garland decided to ride her. And she was tame, but he fell off and he broke his leg. So that pretty well got him in trouble. But other than that, well, he was pretty easygoing. He was the baby for, a long time. And it took him a little while to get over the fact that he couldn't be the baby any longer, that he had to grow up and let Rayford take over. But Garland has always been real, real good to Mother and Daddy and helped them. And of course, when he went to college, But then he decided it was a lot more fun to play in the band than it was to study. So that didn't work out too good, but they finally made it.
And of course, Garland has always close to me. And he was one of the children that had a broken arm or leg or something all the time.
We had our fun. We had one accident that I kind of regretted. I don't think it's my fault. Garland thinks it is, but it wasn't. One of my chores in growing up was I had to milk. I had to milk the cow. Well, we had a very gentle old cow, and anytime I'd go out to milk, well, Garland wanted to go with me, and I would take Garland and set him up on the cow, and he'd ride like a cowboy while I milked. Well, one day the flies were bad, and they got to biting the cow, and the cow moved right quick. Garland fell off and broke his leg, and Mother had to carry him. We didn't have a car. Mother had to carry him all the way to the hospital.
Garland was an entrepreneur. From the earliest time in life, I can remember Garland as being someone who was constantly trying to either develop new ways of doing things or utilize something that existed in a way that would be beneficial to others, and at the same time give him a good return on his investment. He was always generous. I can remember when he first married and moved back to Quanah, he had a bright, shiny, new Buick convertible, beautiful car. And he used to let me borrow that car to take on dates, with the caveat that I not drive it over 30 miles an hour. And that was the fastest car in Hardeman County. And I proved it several times.
Garland that used to take milk to Geneva and Floyd, who lived on the street that they had to go down to go to school. And Garland said, well, just one thing about it, I'm not delivering milk to Mac. So anyway.
We lived about 5 blocks from Mother, and our house was between Mother's house and the schoolhouse. And Garland would have to bring us milk, and that would embarrass him to death, to have to carry milk from Mother's house to our house. He didn't like that a little bit.
When Floyd and Geneva got married, their first apartment where they lived was on the 7th Street, was where we lived, and all the schools were on 7th Street there in Quanah. And we had an old cow, and times was still hard then. And I'd have to carry, on the way to school every morning, I'd have to carry milk by there and leave it off. Well, it was embarrassing on me to be carrying that milk to my sisters, And let's see, I think Geneva and Floyd got married in January, I think. And I think it was about 1939. Then Maxine and Dan got married in that summer. And I remember this, everybody's talking about they's going to get married, And first thing I wanted to know was I going to have to carry milk to them,